And Ravi and all the members here, thank you so much. It's an honor and a privilege to accept this. It does make you feel a little older than you are sometimes when people tell you you've been in the industry for like forever. But I think part of that has been the beauty of this journey. And I strongly believe that I am one of the many, many, many beneficiaries of this industry who just happen to be at the right place at the right time. And we've seen how this thing started from really floundering around with what this might look like. And I'm going back to the mid-90s. And if anyone tells you there was a grand plan to create a BPO industry at that point in time, it's all hogwash. No one knew what was happening. Everyone was shooting in the dark. Everyone had different theories. And what I'm going to do is, I do have a brief presentation that Ravi requested me to do. I just have 3 slides. And what I've tried to do is have essentially, if you've seen the movie from the 70s, it's called Kal Aaj Aur Kal. It's the past, present, and future. So really what I've tried to do is compress everything for the next 20 minutes into what I saw happen in the past, where I think the industry is today, and where I think this will go tomorrow. So this will actually pull back, and like you, I spent a lot of my time down in the trenches, and even today. The idea is, when can we pull back a little bit, see the perspective from a 30,000-foot level, learn from history, and see what we are where we are because of certain empirical things that happened in the past, and where it has kind of grown, and at least a personal opinion on where I think this is leading to. Happy to answer any questions as they come across. So with that, with your permission, like I said, just 3 slides that I would like to start with once we get this off. So phase 1, when I look at history, this is the early days of the industry. My boss at that time was a gentleman called Raman Roy. A lot of you might have heard about him. Many people call him the father of the BPO industry. And we were sitting and we were trying to figure out what to do. And can we give a tagline to the industry? Because we were trying to sell internally, we were trying to work with NASSCOM, and we were trying to find a name for the industry. BPO came much later, actually. And initially we were trying to figure out, so what business are we in? Or it was people trying to outsource for the relatively new companies that had just started around that time. It was experimental. It was experimental for the so-called customers, or for GICs, the principals that were there. There was no clear-cut strategy. I can guarantee you that I rarely saw that. There will be exceptions, obviously, but there were very few people who knew what they wanted to do. It was all about toe-in-the-water approach. Let's see what this India story is all about. Let's see if this will work. It's too far. Telecom is too expensive. Yeah, they have a lot of people who speak English, but they can't deliver. They don't understand process. They don't understand customer service. They don't understand culture differences, and the whole 9 yards that went with all of that. So fundamentally, it started with a very disjointed, non-strategic approach, to the extent that if you really look at, and hindsight, vision is 2020. Hindsight, if you look at a lot of companies, even when they set up their captive centers, they wanted to keep it at like an arm's distance. So I worked for Standard Chartered, and it was not Standard Chartered India BPO, it wasn't Standard, it was Scope, a different name. Bank of America started and called it Continuum. Even the third-party providers, Infosys, when they got into BPO, it wasn't Infosys BPO, then it was Progeon. Satyam started something and it was called Nipuna. Wipro started something and they bought Spectramind. So it was almost like, will this work? We don't know. It's an experiment. And the story goes on and on. So that was one part of that. People are like skeptical. And people are not sure. And that is the first phase. That was one element of that. The second element of that was change management was a big piece. You're moving jobs, and hence while initially the economy was doing very well in the US, which was the predominant market at that point in time, still is in many ways. So change management was a big piece of that, and it was all about how do we convince people, show them a value proposition, and how do we kind of manage this whole thing. People are going to lose jobs there. How do we send people to train them there? The whole transition piece was all very fuzzy and all of that. And again, there are always exceptions to this. But again, in hindsight, when you look at it, a lot of the today very successful centers that you see were created by people not from the mothership, not from the main company. They got people from the outside. We talked about Genpact, which was earlier Jekis, and G was a very big company at that point in time, over potentially 3.5, 4 lakh employees worldwide, in India for a very long time. One of the longest serving expats in India was actually the G head in India, and all of that. They knew India, all of that. And yet, when they set up Jekis, they got Raman Roy from American Express. Similarly, Standard Chartered Bank, they were setting up, they've been in India for over 100 years. They were one of the largest banks in their time, the largest foreign bank in India, etc. And yet, when they wanted to set it up, they brought me in. And not because, I think there was a pattern that was there. We saw the same thing happen with Bank of America. And I can, the list just goes on and on and on. And what I realized was, a lot of them tried. Frankly, even Dell. There was someone who was there. Before I came in to lead Dell in India, they had someone, it just wasn't working. My first conversation with Michael Dell was, I'm so glad you're coming because India does not work for us. And they'd been in the country for 3 years by then. And so that was another theme I saw. You wanted someone from the outside who did not have the baggage, who could be disruptive, who potentially could be entrepreneurial, who could look at things from a distance and drive the change very differently from someone who was already part of the system and where it would become very difficult. So that was another element we saw. So there was no strategy. There was a lot of skepticism. People were brought in from the outside to create this. It was done at its arm's length because it was still, will it work, will it not work, will it impact our brand here, brand elsewhere, will we have to shut it down because we can't meet service levels? All those things were going on when this whole thing started. That was kind of phase one. And then gradually, we started seeing success as an industry. I remember the first time McKinsey did a study, I think this was in 96, 97. They came and said that this will be an $8 billion industry in some 9 years, 8 years or something like that. And everyone was laughing at them because we are not even a $100 million industry at that point in time. Fast forward, well, we are a $25 billion industry today. So moving on from that came phase two. Oh, great. So this is back. So like I was saying, it was a very hesitant offshoring strategy that was there. It was very experimental, and an evolutionary approach. There were a lot of disjointed pilots, can I find a champion there and he'll give you 10 people, can you do this? And he'll give me 50 people, can we do this? There was a lot of focus on change management. And frankly, even at that time, some of the new companies had just started coming up and there was this big build or buy decision. So companies were struggling with, do I outsource, do I do it myself? And I can tell you one thing, I had a friend who was my CFO, and he once told me, he said, you torture a spreadsheet enough and it'll confess to anything. And that was how build and buy decisions were being made, I actually know of companies which have spent more than what they would save potentially in 2 years in just trying to do a site analysis of which city should they have their center in. It's all a question of what kind of organization you're with. So there is no right and wrong in this. There is no white and black in this. There is no one answer to this. Everything works. The question is, what is the right answer for your organization? Whether it's a build or buy, whether it is the organization design after you've built it, and all of that. And there are multiple possibilities. Personally, I think they all work. It all depends on who the leaders are, what are the kind of work you're doing, and where it goes. So really, this was, before I lose this again, this was phase one. Phase two was, give or take, by the time we were about 10 years into the industry, we changed the slogan again. And this slogan then became, come for quality. Cost is a given. Come for quality, but stay for innovation. So this became kind of the second phase of the industry, in my opinion, which said, okay, not only can we do it, we can do it very well. And by the way, we understand what we are doing and how it impacts the rest of the organization. We can become innovation centers. So a lot of companies by this time started creating products. And while I was at Dell, we did a lot of that. We actually created products that were conceptualized, designed, created in India, and then potentially even piloted in India and then exported to the rest of the world. And the only reason you could do that was there was enough local knowledge, there was enough deep domain understanding of what was going on. And the reason for that was really about having critical mass. So it wasn't now spattered. It wasn't unlike in phase one, bits here, bits there. Now people are looking at end-to-end processes moving. People are looking at a whole business impact for something that was being done. So earlier it was, okay, here's a claim for an insurance company. Can you just scan it and do the data entry? Then it moved on to, okay, can you adjudicate it? Then it moved on to, can you pay it? Then it moved on to, can you re-engineer the way we do it? Just as an oversimplified example. Same thing for mortgages, same thing for auto loans. We look at banking, you look at insurance, and then you look at other processes that became very kind of common then. So what happened was, it all started with brand India being established. So then it was no longer, oh, will you be able to do it? Or will it be a big risk? It was, well, if he can do it, I can do it. There were enough early movers who had set the stage. People saw them. Personally, I can tell you I must have hosted upwards of 30 Fortune 500 boards who at some point of time or other wanted to come and see how they could leverage India. It was all about India. So that brand got established pretty firmly. And once again, the IT industry played a big role in that because after Y2K and everything else, that became the norm. And the pure play, the Wipros, the Infosys, the Cognizant, all of that began to kind of be seen on the global platform, and that helped as well. So Brand India was established. Within the BPO world, the BPS world, sustainable critical mass was achieved. So you were doing larger end-to-end processes so people could understand what was happening. This is the time we also saw, carrying on the same example, Scope became Standard Chartered India. Progeon became Infosys BPO. So there was an acceptance. And that is when they started getting more and more integrated with what I call the mothership, but really it's the larger organization. And this is a journey. Now, it's quite possible that some people are laggards in this, and you will probably identify for your respective organizations where you might be on this. Right at the front, lagging a little bit. But we've seen this as a fairly consistent, I've seen this as a fairly consistent journey at least, that happens. And then, center of excellence driven innovation. Give it to us, leave it to us, and we'll figure it out. We got good brains here. We understand what it takes. It's no longer about just the technology and the process. It's not just, I'll tell you what to do, just do that well and don't make a mistake. Now it's about understand why you're doing it, understand what happens before and after, understand how it impacts the organization, understand what is the purpose of doing this and how it can impact the entire P&L sometimes, and what can you do about it. So whether it was Six Sigma or Lean or more recently design thinking and, so different tools, but the fact remains that innovation is becoming more and more mainstay. This is where I think we still are. So innovation is becoming more and more mainstay. And whether it is on the services side, whether it is on the product side, whether it is on the technology side, I'm seeing a lot more products, a lot more processes designed, created, innovated from here for the rest of the world. At that point, let me go back to this part, what I call brand India. See, again, in my personal opinion, a brand is a perception. What is a perception? Again, in my opinion, a perception is nothing but reality with a lag. So if you are saying, our brand is weak back home, or the perception is whatever it is, not optimal with the mothership, I think you got to look internally more than blame someone for it. Yes, there will be detractors, and yes, there will be people who don't want to lose the control and their teams offshore and onshore and do all of that. But the truth is, ultimately it will reflect what you are really capable of. So perception is nothing, reality with a lag. It will take some time. So if you can demonstrate, whether it is innovation, whether it is delivery at a certain level, whether it is the ability to handle more than what has normally been given to you, if you can show that you can be flexible, you can show that you're agile in what you're doing, you can show that you can actually add value, the truth is your brand will reflect that ultimately. And yes, getting a seat on the table like Pankajam talked about, yes, is important, but it depends on us. It doesn't depend on someone giving you the seat. It depends on you being able to demonstrate that you're capable of the seat. So there's no point trying to blame someone sitting there saying, that's coming in the way and hence we can't grow and hence we can't do this. I personally don't believe in that. And I worked with 5 different organizations on the inside and a lot of them from the outside, consulting with them, where I strongly believe that. So the problem is not there. If there is an opportunity, there has to be a way of making sure that they can understand what the value can come out of it. That's what I believe. And finally, while all this is great, we are now at a stage where I think we're going to start seeing some headwinds of digital disruption. And there are 2 elements to this. One, in my mind, is just the fact that we are a mature industry now. And if you look back at the balance sheets of even the providers, because they have a separate balance sheet, which is true, and most others tends to be more pseudo and cost plus and all of that. So I just, for a moment, let's use that as a proxy to the state of the economy, state of the nation in terms of the industry. Growth is coming down. Profitability is coming down. So in a rising tide, all ships rise, and that's what happened in the last 15, 20 years in this industry. At least till 2010, 11, 12, you saw that, if you talk to the CEOs at that time, what is the big challenge? I can't find enough people. Oh, I need to get telecom costs down, which was back in the 90s. Just a bit of trivia. We set up the first international call center in GE in 96. We had a 2 Mbps line. It is M. 2 Mbps line, which was a dedicated line from India to the US. Any guesses what we paid for that? And VSNL was the only provider at that point in time. What was our annual cost of that 2 Mbps line from India to the US? Guesses? Come on, shoot. 20 lakhs, okay. Any other guesses? Sorry? 2 crores. And by the way, we had 10 people, 10 call center agents working on that at that point in time. It was $1.2 million. So today, something that we take for granted, there's a lot of work that the industry did up front to kind of steadily bring down these prices. And that was a big thing for us. And then it came to, how do we find the right people? And then it came to, how do we train them, and how do we cultural assimilation, and do this, and then it came to, how do we get better at connectivity? Then it came to innovation. So, the challenges, like any other industry, has been moving, except at a much faster rate in this case. What do you think are the challenges today? You guys face it every day. What are your challenges today? Skill set. What else? Sorry? Attrition. Retention, attrition, two sides of the same coin. What else? Constant change and disruption. Let me guarantee you, if it's not there already, in the next couple of years, cost will be one of your biggest challenges. It will be. Because like any other industry, it has been taken for granted as of now because we are all growing. And in a growing board, and as that kind of begins to level off, my prediction is our challenges have all been around growth. I think now it's going to become more around profitability and value addition. And like Pankajam said, there's one way of measuring productivity, and that's the numbers. Cost will start becoming more and more important. And by the way, sorry, but I disagree with you, Ravi, when you say the cost arbitrage is not there. I think the cost arbitrage is still very much alive. It is still very much alive, and frankly, that continues to be one of the three big things that we still have going in our favor. Cost continues to be number one on that. Number two continues to be the skills that are still available. Now, they will change, and I'll talk about that in a second. But just the amount, the demographic dividend continues to be a big advantage that we have. And a third one is, today we are in a position of strength. We don't have to continuously need to prove ourselves. So today we are innocent till proven guilty. The case was the reverse in phase one. You have to prove everything. We were guilty till proven innocent. So that has changed. So these are three things I think still in our favor as far as the industry is concerned. And finally, let me get on to the next phase. And I don't have a tagline for that yet, but if I was to create one, sorry, this is jumping. I would say the third phase, in my opinion, is co-creating the ecosystem. It is no longer about a process, a skill. It is no longer about doing a piece of work. The world is moving towards a full ecosystem change. How many of you have used Uber? Can you raise your hands? Okay. Just keep your hands up. How many of you had a problem sometime with Uber? Keep your hands up, the others can put it down. A lot of you. How many of you had to speak to an agent to solve that problem? Keep your hands up. And if you look around the room, it's probably less than 5% of the people who had a problem needed to speak to an agent. So that model, when you look at, they have created an ecosystem. What is Amazon? It's an ecosystem. What is Uber? It's an ecosystem. Today, when you look at payments, take even the older ones, take Visa. The market cap of Visa today is 4 times the market cap of a large bank with 4 times the number of employees and equal revenue, for example. Why? It's all moving towards an ecosystem at that level. Now, come to your organizations. Disruption is real, and that is going to happen. Now, the question is, are you going to be waiting for someone to hand it down to you saying this is disrupted and this is where it's going? Or are you going to be part of the solution? Say, before this happens to us, this is what we can do. So, what does this mean? So the future of phase 3, which is, in my opinion, the future of where we are going, it's going to start by understanding what ecosystem we are part of, not only playing in it, but creating it. And if it sounds a little abstract, it is. Because you don't know what is sitting out there to disrupt your business tomorrow. Large businesses have got disrupted overnight, and this will continue to happen. You look at the changing sources of competitive advantage. There was a time, just the fact that you had data, that was the competitive advantage. No longer. Today you have more data than you ever need. Today that competitive advantage has shifted not to having data, but what you do with it, to the analytics of that. Yeah. Yesterday it was, take the same example of a call center. That was a whole industry. that's probably a, a 50 billion dollar plus industry as call centers. Where do you think that's going? With chatbots happening, with self-service happening, with AI, ML, and all the fancy things that are happening around that. Where do you think that is going? What do you think will happen to that? It's going to change. I can promise you it's going to change. It's going to look very different. Already, we can start seeing a shift in the kind of work. And sometimes what happens is it looks gradual to us, but when you step back and you look at it and you say, oh my God, I didn't expect this to happen. So the other thing is, the whole AI, ML, RPA, blockchain, and Agile is not just, the Agile framework of software development or something. It is as a company being Agile, fail fast. I mean, hell, just look at our own government. Look at economists today. They've stopped looking at 5-year horizons. No one does 5-year planning anymore. They say even 1 year is too long. Look at GST in India. It was done in the Agile way. Now, you might have your own opinions, good, bad. I'm not talking about that. But the way it was executed was not how plans were executed earlier. And this has got nothing to do with the existing government. This is a necessity of the times. And what does Agile mean? Do something, right, wrong, you find something wrong, fix it, come back, do it again, fix it, come back. You're Agile. You're doing it in small parts, small releases, making course corrections along the way, and making it happen. And that's the way the world is going for everything, including your strategy. The 5-year strategy plans are all dead. But the problem is a lot of us grew up in that era, and we believe that's the only way to do planning. 1-year plans, 5-year plans, 3-year outlooks, all of that. All of that is going away. Agility will come down to almost a daily core on what you do in everything that you do. And, the seamless integration of technology and resources. One of the big things that's going to happen going forward is, Pankajam talked about customers, and absolutely the most important thing in any business. Guess what? Who are going to be the biggest customers for a lot of companies in the future? Machines. Your refrigerator will start ordering your groceries. It could be as simple as that. Machines will order 2 machines, and machines will take care of that customer service, if you can call it that. And they will both be a lot more efficient than the current way things are being done. So new customer is emerging. The new customer is machines. AI algorithms will decide what is required when, go ahead, indent it, place the orders, monitor when it's come, pay for it, and be done with it. What do you think that does to our industry? Which is still very we still measure things, we talked about so many captives or, GICs or whatever are less than 500. We still measure in FTE. Because, that's what we grew up with. Having more people meant we were bigger. That's also going to change. How value is added is going to be equally important in terms of what scale you have. And that's the other piece that's going to happen. And finally, we kept talking about centers of excellence, and that's what led to innovation and stuff like that. Personally, I think the definition of the COE will change. And I think the new definition will be a core operating environment. Or ecosystem, sorry, not environment, ecosystem. This is all going to be about the ecosystems that we can create, and that will determine what your tomorrows look like. So while you're all very focused on how to deliver value today, how to make sure we are doing the best job today in terms of whatever we are doing, etc., I think tomorrow is going to be more about not the job that you're doing, but why it's being done. I'll give you one last example, which is from the current organization that I'm with. Today CEOs are afraid to even set a target. And hopefully this example will exemplify what I'm trying to say. We do claims processing for one of the largest insurance companies in the world. And the whole idea was it used to take X amount of time, Y amount of dollars to process every claim. Now, conventional wisdom would say, okay, Can we reduce this by 20%? Can we make it more effective and more productive by 20%? But is 20% the right number? Why not 10? Is that a better number? Or why not 80? Is that achievable? And what do you do with that? So this CEO of this company said, look, I don't know what the number is, so I'm not going to set a target like that. I am saying, can you help me co-create whatever is the best way of doing that? So earlier, this thing used to take a couple of days. This is property and casualty insurance. The new system, I'll just fast forward to what was then created, which is running today. Today, for example, there is a storm and there's a damage the storm causes in your house and you can claim insurance. And earlier there was a lot of paperwork and then there was surveys and then someone would adjudicate it and then someone would pay it, and that whole process could effectively run into, literally if it was fast-tracked, into a couple of weeks, if not more. Today that person goes into app, takes photographs, uploads. There is an AI engine which looks at it, does everything that a human would have normally done. Check if there was a storm, goes and fetches the data from the Met department saying, was there a storm? Sends out a drone to capture images, looks at the images that have come and see they are not doctored, looks at whether the claim is valid or not, looks at the amount, gets an estimate of what needs to be done. All of this, which normally would have taken an individual to do, is being done through an AI/ML interface that has been created. It is working today, by the way. And what it does, it throws out a number. And that number says the probability of this claim being false or a fraud is X percentage. So let's say there's a 10% possibility that this is a fake claim, or a 15%. And then all the company needs to do is shift the kind of index saying, well, if it is up to 85% and it is less than $5,000, just pay it. Because it costs more than that just to process it. So what used to take 2 weeks, frankly, is not done today in a matter of give or take 2 hours if there is a drone that goes and comes back. Otherwise, it could be a few seconds. This is just one example. So I want to leave that with you from 2 points of view. One, if you're a leader, where do you set the bar? Because if he'd said, I want to cut cost by 20% or improve time by 20%, he was way off the mark. Cost came down by 90%, time came down by 95%. And that is what is happening. That is disruptive. And that is what is happening in every business. There is a potential of that sitting in every business. Actually, one last thing, I love this example. When do you think the wheel was invented? Just the wheel. When did mankind invent the wheel? Stone Age. So a few thousand years back, right? When did people start traveling? Again, pretty much forever, right? When did people start traveling with bags? A trunk, something. You know, there were ships have been out for literally thousands of years again. And people used to carry them, carry their belongings in a bag. So the wheel has been there forever. The bag has been there forever. It was only in 1972 that someone put these two together to create a trolley. Today you can't buy a suitcase without wheels. I mean, you have to really hunt for one which doesn't have wheels, right? It took, if not thousands or hundreds of years for two obvious things to come together. And my message is, in every work that you do, there is a bag and there is a wheel sitting there. It will become very obvious when you put it together. Right now, you might not see it. The challenge is, how do you put that wheel on the bag? And that changed life of baggage companies forever. That changed the way we travel. And when you look back, it's such an obvious thing, and yet it took hundreds of years, if not thousands of years, to make that happen. So from a disruption perspective, from an innovation perspective, when you say there's nothing that can be done, I never believe that. I've never believed that, I never believe that. And this is what comes to my mind when someone tells me that. The wheel in the bag. So, thank you. If there are any questions, I'm happy to take them.